the mitochondria, which receives light, metabolizes light, creates it into energy, does more than even that. It's actually at an esoteric level, being able to restructure our divine blueprint or our DNA, not just the meridian systems and all of our energy centers, but really be able to reconfigure our energy field at every level. How are the solar flares and the geomagnetic storms affecting us at a spiritual, energetic, and even cellular level? Well, for one, when we see large bursts of plasma from the sun that enter our magnetic field, what's happening at a cellular level and even at a spiritual level is that our mitochondria is being given bursts of energy. And what that mitochondria does for our own spiritual evolution is something that rarely goes noticed or really even a lot of attention placed on it. And what the mitochondria does really determines the caliber and the quality of our DNA. So we should really be looking at DNA activations and upgrades through also the lens of our mitochondria. One could even say that the mitochondria's role is sometimes even more important because the mitochondria are doing so much for our body, mind, spirit. So what these geomagnetic storms are truly doing for our spiritual evolution is they are outpouring and casting a bunch of plasma to our whole energy field and to the Earth's energy field. And what that's doing is, at a cellular level, allowing our mitochondria, which is bacteria, to be able to use more coherency and higher consciousness energy to reboot and literally upgrade our body mind. And so when we think about DNA activations, what we typically think of is that it's being activated, but we also think that it's also the power source. The mitochondria are the actual power source. Mitochondria go far beyond the simple purpose we have been told they serve. I encourage you to explore the field of quantum biology, which is confirming esoteric science without really even meaning to. Mitochondria act as the generators and the sensors all throughout our body. And through the body's electron transport chain, they make infrared light for us. They make water for us, and they make biophotons. So biophotons signal information to our DNA as well as our whole body. And signaling is a huge part of our entire energy field's ability to regenerate itself. When large geomagnetic storms enter our magnetic field, it is stressful on our entire system because it's immersing Earth and ourselves in higher dimensional light codes that raise our consciousness. And this signaling goes into overdrive during geomagnetic storms, which is why we may feel tired, heightened, or have disturbances even in our sleep cycles. It's what allows the DNA to be able to go into a larger blueprint or a more holistic and even a more coherent blueprint. So DNA repair and DNA activations, meaning that even more of the information inside our DNA template can be utilized, because not all of it's even being utilized. But all of that depends on how well up to date, so to speak, the mitochondria is. So the mitochondria, which receives light, metabolizes light, creates it into energy, does more than even that. It's actually at an esoteric level, being able to restructure our divine blueprint or our DNA, and also go through the different, not just the meridian systems and all of our energy centers, but really be able to reconfigure our energy field at every level. So meaning that our energy centers, as well as our cellular body, as well as the mental plane of our body, mind, spirit. So all these different levels need a power source, right? And that power source at a cellular level is the mitochondria. Now at a spiritual level, it's the heart center, and we know that very well. I've done several videos of that, about how powerful the heart center is, because it's the portal to the unified field of consciousness. So, but this is about the mitochondria. And so how the mitochondria are being able to help when it comes to these solar flares we're experiencing and these geomagnetic storms is they're utilizing the high levels of plasma that's entering our energy field through these methods. And what that's doing is actually helping rewire our body, mind, spirit, rewire our energy field so that it can keep up with not just the constant upgrades, but universal consciousness, going into higher states of consciousness. That's why they're so disruptive, and that's why they get experienced sometimes through chaos, because the lower frequency states of consciousness are actually being like dissolved, they're being challenged, they're being disrupted at a very aggressive level when you get these higher levels of consciousness that our mitochondria and our whole body, mind, spirit is receiving. That just starts to dissolve everything that is not of that higher frequency and that higher consciousness. Now, I could give a very good example of what it does to a person's energy field that's operating at a lower level of consciousness. Or even just our energy fields when we want to expand and upgrade our consciousness. I want you to think of the visual representation of what very strong solar storms or very strong geomagnetic storms do to our whole grid system. You start seeing grid system shut down, right? You start seeing there being a lot of electrical disruption. Why? It's because that grid system or that framework does not have the bandwidth to hold that level of intenseness or that overwhelming amount of energy and consciousness that it is receiving. And that's why you see electrical grid systems go down. Well, imagine now that it's a person's energy field that has not been receiving upgrades or just a lower level of consciousness. And you see how it's also doing that? It would go into chaos. Why? Because it does not have the bandwidth. So even though that's not bad at all, to be able to receive upgrades is actually positive. To say that we never get challenged or have to rise into an expanded state to receive these is just not realistic. But instead, it's really important to understand the difference between how a person receives the energy through these events, dependent on their state, their dominant frequency, their dominant state of consciousness. No matter what, we'll see an influx, right? We'll see overwhelm, so to speak. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's negative. Overwhelm is also what we call creative stress or evolutionary stress versus negative stress, right? What we see in the human collective is that we're always put under like a very strong stress that almost seems not productive at all, versus when a person is challenging themselves under creative stress, under organic stress. We evolve actually through the mechanism of stress. So stress itself isn't negative. It's just depending on what kind of stress it is. A depleting, draining, soulless stress, or one that is creative and challenging and one that asks us to rise to the occasion. So creative stress is actually not only how we evolve, it's what gives us meaning. And so think of when we're receiving these upgrades from these geomagnetic storms. It's really our mitochondria now needing to metabolize a lot more light. It's going from that level first, but then it goes to the DNA level. And then these are just the physiological and cellular levels. I have a video on the spiritual level of this that you can watch if you want to know it more from like the energetic, conscious, and spiritual level. You can watch it. It's why you're feeling this right now. And so that talks about how the sun gives us spiritual upgrades. But when we're thinking about this at the cellular level or our body mind, it's so strongly related to why these geomagnetic storms or these solar storms make us feel very disoriented or make things go into sometimes a more distressed state of chaos. It's not because they're negative, and many of you already know that. It's simply just because it's stressful. And it's an evolutionary stress to ask for a higher level of consciousness, such as unity consciousness, which is what the solar logos, or what the solar consciousness represents our higher self and a unity consciousness. So when we're having those codes emitted to us, and then our body mind is absorbing them and then metabolizing them and then integrating them into our energy field, that is going to be quite efficient and easy and graceful for some people. And then for others, it might be a little challenging, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that and no judgment. And then for others, it might be completely disorienting and destabilizing. So there's more than just those three options. It's a spectrum, but it doesn't really matter how we receive it. If like we weren't dazed and confused while we received it or not, there's no test there. It doesn't matter. It's simply going to always meet us wherever we're at. So it's going to be something that's unique and personal. We're always going to be challenged, and we should not go into any judgment because of that. Now, how we receive all of this in the mental body is that we actually get rewired so that it's very easy for us to be able to create new pathways, new neuronal connections when we're having very strong universal energies presented at us in almost like a bombarding way. What that does is actually break apart connections within our body mind that no longer serve us. So they're actually helping us become very neuroplastic, be able to rewire that. And what that means is that, let's say that you have been just looping in a negative thought pattern and you can't seem to get yourself out of that. Or let's say you're already aware of what thought patterns are inside your body mind, and you're aware of how these connections constantly repeat themselves and that we've to some degree reinforced them. And so what these do is actually really help us move into a more beneficial state of being, because we're already working on that. We're already aware of that. And so these actually just give us more of that energetic support. And what all of this translates to is feeling very lucid. So while we're being rewired, how that's going to be mainly experienced is by feeling lucid. A lot of people might interpret that lucid feeling as being kind of like out of it or daydreamy or just like not locked in. But really what's going on is that things are feeling very ungrounded or lucid simply because we're being rewired. You can't actually feel rewired in a super grounded, analytical, beta 3D state. So when we feel out of it, that's not bad, and that doesn't mean we're not keeping up with the upgrades. What that really means is that we're actually just having our body, mind, spirit rewired, reconfigured for us. And so the more we're in that non-linear or that lucid, even a sensation of ungrounded state, it's really positive to do whatever practices that you feel called to do to ground. But if you're looking for just like trying to not feel that and thinking that grounding will make you not feel that, that's not the point. You'll still feel that lucid feeling if you're at that level of consciousness where you can receive them and your mitochondria and your DNA are being activated to go into a larger state of coherency. no matter what, that's going to feel expanded. So that expanded state is also another way of describing the lucidness. It's an expansive state. And a lot of times we condemn anything that has to do with not being grounded, right? Because we want to value and emphasize the importance of embodiment. So usually when we want to emphasize something, we demonize something else to do it. We haven't learned yet how to balance them and incorporate them. So to balance the fact that we need to be grounded, we sometimes demonize feeling or being ungrounded, and simply you're just not going to be able to be grounded all the time. Ungroundedness isn't always negative. Start thinking of everything in a more nuanced way. Start thinking of everything as a spectrum. Yes, there are some negative forms of being ungrounded. We've seen that a lot inside the spiritual community. It's called disassociation for the most part. But now, in a state of receiving and going through these geomagnetic storms, or any form actually of upgrades, you will go into a more receptive, nonlinear form, which will feel and be experienced as ungrounded. I hope this has helped you appreciate your mitochondria a whole lot more. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.